And Stella.
Well, on that value for money, so I think there's clearly concern about value for money in terms of 2-month custodial sentences. And on that, could I just check, do you measure by institution the various successes in terms of reoffending? Do you break that down by institution?
We don't measure it by individual YOI or children's home or what have you, no. We have, though, got a longitudinal study taking place at the moment on a whole range of aspects of youth offending, following youngsters across a period of time, and that will provide us with more data about the relative effectiveness of different parts of the sector.
But would it not be logical, in terms of assessing value for money, to be measuring the data from which institutions are doing it well and which are doing it badly?
You could do that. I mean, the reason why we haven't done it
I know
today,
we could, but should we not be?
Well, one of the difficulties with it is that youngsters do move about a lot in the course of the sentence. So it's not the case...
But within 2 months?
Within 2 months, they could very easily do so, yeah. And that does create a difficulty. Analysts would also say that in order to really get an answer which is analytically satisfactory, you have to eliminate all sorts of individual factors which will vary from one child to another. Right. And that makes the very small scale comparators that perhaps such a study would produce quite difficult to draw really binding conclusions from.
Okay. The concern I had reading the report was more widely in terms of whether you're achieving value for money, because as paragraph 2.2 says, the quality of assessment is a key determinant of how much and what kind of resources each offender will have spent on them. In other words, it's the assessment that drives how you spend your money. But the report also says that a third of your assessments are not of sufficient quality. A third of your assessments are not of sufficient quality.
Of the youth offending teams assessments.
Yes.
They're not ours, they're accountable to local authorities. But yes, that's absolutely right, and that is something we're concerned about just as much as you are, and which is why the YJB has been working so hard with the yachts concerned to try and improve performance. So they've created...
Okay, I'm being asked, can you speak up a bit?
Sorry,
there's some problem in hearing.
Okay. So that's why the YJB has created 8, I think, regional fora now to actually try and improve performance of YOTs, why it's been working with the worst performers, some of whom are mentioned here in the table, I think figure 10, and trying to improve their performance. And the few that have been re-inspected since that performance improvement system has been put in place have improved. Sefton and Rochdale being 2 well-known examples now in the system. And actually, as of today, we had 2 further inspections, Barnsley and Leeds, which come in much better as well.
Well, we'll probably come on to the fact that you're not actually measuring which interventions work and which don't, because the report makes that clear. But actually, the report suggests it's even worse on value for money, because if one looks at paragraph 3.9, what it says is those who have most contact with practitioners and consume the bulk of justice spending have either worsened or stayed largely stable, respectively. So a third of the assessments you're doing of a poor quality, that is driving the money. And the area where you're spending most of your money is the area where you're seeing the worst results.
The point I was making is that on the assessments, we actually do want to drive up the quality of the assessments. And all the work that's been geared by the YJB has actually driven up the quality of assessments. So on the re-inspections of those very same yachts that were failing, for example, included in the 3 that are included in that table, they've all improved.
Well, I mean, we'll get into the regional variations, no doubt, because, I mean, there are massive, I mean, the difference between Somerset and North Somerset, for example. But I just wanted also just to take you to figure 4, because figure 4 gives the impression that there has been considerable progress in terms of the reduction in matters which have been dealt with as crimes. I just wanted to understand whether there's been any displacement in terms of matters that were previously dealt with as criminal offences, which are now being dealt with as civil offences.
Right. I don't know that, John.
No, I don't think that's the case. If you were worrying about PNDs, police notices, that is now factored into the statistics.
What I was driving at is, for example, restorative justice programmes, ASBOs that are dealt with by local authorities, informal agreements where the council have come to an agreement, or indeed figures around arrests where there's been an arrest but there hasn't been a charge. Have there been an increase in numbers in any of those areas which would previously have been dealt with within what's covered by figure 4?
Yes, there are some localities that are doing very early intervention in which before a formal disposal is decided upon, there are restorative initiatives take place. And the consequence of that, you're absolutely right, would be in some instances children wouldn't appear in the official statistics in the way that this group of children do as a consequence of the intervention. What I wouldn't like you to go away from here with the impression was that those weren't interventions that didn't confront children with the consequences of their behaviour.
But again, you don't know, because A, you're not measuring them, but in essence, the concern I have is all you're perhaps doing is recategorising them, because, I mean, the report itself says it is not known to what extent falls in first-time entrants reflect genuine reductions in crime. So if you had offences or matters previously which were dealt with criminal offences, and which you now rebadge and deal with in a different way, you have not necessarily reduced the problem. You're just dealing with them in a different way. And then when you are making assessments, a third of those are of a poor quality, and so that's driving what you're doing. A quarter of the assessments are being ignored anyway in sentencing, which again I'm sure we'll come on to, which suggests a lack of faith there. And those assessments which are used, which drives the bulk of your spending, are having the worst results. So I'm struggling to see where you can evidence you're achieving value for money.
There are a whole range of things, as you rightly said, as you've gone on, that you've raised in that question. On the particular issue of are the pre-formal disposals displacing activity? Not to the degree. I'd be confident in saying not to the degree that the numbers of first-time entrants have fallen. That won't be the case throughout the country. There will be some schemes where that probably does account in significant measure for the fall in first-time entrants.
But you're not measuring those?
We are aware of the volume of activity. We don't count it in that way.
But you don't measure which interventions work. So you don't say one local authority has had a really innovative idea that works well, and we're going to spread best practice.
No, we do.
We do.
So the report makes reference to that not happening.
Yeah, well, this is a question of degree. And also about findings that have an analytical rigour or not. But I mean, if I could give you an example, perhaps that will make things more concrete. In Swansea, for a number of years now, they've operated what's known as the Swansea Youth Offending Bureau, which is a joint police youth offending team initiative. And there, when a youngster comes to the attention of the police, in the first instance, they're bailed for a 2-week period, and their case is considered by the Bureau, which is chaired by a senior police officer. And there they do have the option of doing a disposal which wouldn't count in the figures in Table 4. But they do then keep a track of what happens to the young people who are subject of pre-forward disposal. And actually, they are much less likely to reappear than the young people who are the subject of more formal
Why don't you measure that nationally?
Because there isn't one system nationally. The Swansea system is pretty unique.
I mean, I think one of the things we feel, I'll come to Stella, one of the things I felt in reading the report was, you know, you can reinvent 157 ways of doing it, and there doesn't, one of the obvious raison d'etre of your existence will be that you should learn from best practice. And then spread it across the country rather than reinventing the wheel. So it seems to me a bit
also spend in terms of need as well, because you didn't. I mean, you didn't actually address it in terms of need. You gave each geographical area the same figure.
Why? Yeah,
sorry,
I think we're on the same.
There are a lot of questions here, but can I just, Jerry, in answer to your question, it would be completely daft if we didn't take the learning from one area to another, and we do. I'm sure that there's more that we can do in relation.
The report
to
says in paragraph 3.6.
It's not what the report says. Yes.
While this approach is paragraph 3.6, halfway through,